Well, good morning and welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning, and I'm so excited about this morning's broadcast and really the next week as well. We have a jam-packed lineup. I'm going to tell you the schedule next week a little bit later on, but on this morning's broadcast, not only is it Fridays with Phil, Assemblyman Phil Palmesano will be joining us in the 7 o'clock hour, but before that, in just a little bit, in the 6 o'clock hour, we are going to be talking with Nancy Jones. Nancy Jones, the wife of the legendary George Jones, the possum. There is a new album of kind of lost music, if you will, from George Jones called George Jones, The Lost Nashville Session. And the vinyl is out today. We're going to hear from Nancy Jones. We're going to talk a little bit about the possum as well when we talk with her. So that's coming up in just a little bit. And then I said 7 o'clock. Phil Palmesano, I've received a few questions from you. Thank you very much. Let's get to a couple comments from viewers. Oh, some I've missed already, but we'll get to them a little bit later on. First up, given the pagers Israel gave to the terrorists, if I was President Trump, I'd put the pager given to him in a bomb-proof safe. Yes, I kind of like this idea that Benjamin Netanyahu is gifting people with these pagers to highlight just really how amazing that operation was with the pagers. So point taken. Thank you, viewer. Comment from Mark. Good morning, Frank. Well, good morning, Mark. Elon Musk is visiting the Pentagon today to evaluate the waste, and the media and the Democrats are furious. Yes, there's a lot of examples of the Democrats and the media furious at Elon Musk, but they're also, interestingly enough, right now, very furious in a different kind of level, in a different kind of way, with their own party. There's been town halls where Democrat representatives felt, obviously they're going to be in a safe space, when it was quite the opposite. Their constituents believing that they had not or have not been forceful enough against Trump. We're going to be talking about that as well, and the attacks on Chuck Schumer. Also, I heard from many people about NYSEG. We've talked about that frequently on this program. We talked with Senator Tom O'Mara last week, I believe it was, about that exact issue. I understand, and I appreciate your concerns. And then I heard yesterday people that were outraged over this. Well, it's a community event being held by NYSEG, and it's on March 27th. And the one near us is at the American Legion in Big Flats from 4 to 7, so you can mark your calendar for that if you're interested in going. But it's not a town hall. That's what has people, and I received a lot of comments. Thank you. I'm kind of paraphrasing everybody who sent in. I'm sorry if I'm not addressing yours specifically, but they're all very similar, that it's not a town hall event to find out why your rates went up. It's so that you can talk directly to basically customer service, as if you were calling NYSEG on the phone to ask about your bill. They're going to answer billing questions and the like. But again, they were stressing the point that it's not a town hall. And many outraged over that. But if you are still interested in attending, it is March 27th at the American Legion in Big Flats from 4 to 7 p.m. Also, someone had asked me, this might have been last week, they're not happy with Trump. They're not happy with Musk. But very respectful in their text. And I love reading all texts as long as they're respectful on both sides. We play no bias here. And they had asked if I knew when the next protest against Trump would take place on Market Street. Originally, I'd heard April 5th was the one that was the soonest. I have been told they do not normally send me a press release directly, but I've been told there may be a protest, and take this with a grain of salt, it may be a protest today going down the street at 11 here on Market Street at 11 today. So that's helping out a viewer. But again, take that with a grain of salt because I'm hearing it through the grapevine and not directly from organizers. Okay. Couple of updates. Oh, we've been talking about Gavin Newsom, and we're moving on quickly from him. But he's kind of playing with fire right now because he's trying to present himself as more moderate because obviously we know Gavin Newsom, California governor, radical liberal. He wants to run for president. That's no secret. Many had said he was running for president before Biden dropped out in the way that he was campaigning for Biden. But now he's had some conservatives on his podcast. Well, now, I don't know how many conservative Republicans he's going to dupe, but he's definitely making many in his party angry. On CNN's show Out Front, host Aaron Burnett said tonight, quote, well, I don't want to use the exact term she used, but what in heaven's name is going on with Gavin Newsom? That's a headline. And there's headline after headline asking that sort of question as the country is trying to figure out how he went from progressive hero and governor of the most liberal state in the country to interviewing and spending time with MAGA favorites like Steve Bannon and Charlie Kirk on his new podcast. Tonight, our K-File looked into that, finding that Newsom, well, he's really completely changed his tune on some of the most hot-button issues for Democrats. He goes out and he backs away from some unpopular progressive policies, even ones that he's championed. And that's what's interesting, to use that, I think, really cliche term. You can show the receipts, right? You can see where he was once for one thing, the kind of flip-flopping idea, right? Something that was very ultra-progressive. Now, as he realizes he has 4 years to convince people he isn't the radical leftist that he is. So now he's changing his tune. But I'll continue. The one that they highlighted specifically was the word Latinx. Just 2 weeks ago, he said, not one person in my office has ever used the word Latinx. Then they found, of course, video of him repeatedly using it in his office. Latinx replaces Latina or Latino. Burnett said, so he's also rewriting history a bit. See, they still have to be careful. They can't say he's just rewriting history. They still realize that he may be the front runner. I would think, just like you would think the nursing home deaths alone would end any kind of political future for Andrew Cuomo. But now we see he's running for mayor as the front runner. The same goes for Gavin Newsom. You would think the wildfires and his handling of the wildfires would discredit him from ever running for office, especially the president of the United States, but perhaps not. It seems as if perhaps the Democrat Party has a short-term memory. So back to what Burnett said. So he's also rewriting history a bit on his stance on transgender issues, which he had at a point of view on his podcast. Again, just 2 weeks ago, here's where he is now. Discussing transgender issues on his podcast, Newsom said, it turns out in 2014, years before I was governor, there was a law established the legal principles that allowed trans athletes in women's sports. But the issue of fairness is completely legit. It's an issue of fairness, and I think Democrats have lost that. In that statement, he's kind of making it sound like he wasn't involved in this at all. He's like, oh, it was 2014, years before I was governor. Like, you mean when you were the lieutenant governor, when you actively defended and praised that law? So he's receiving anger and criticism from his own party. So he has a fine line that he has to walk, and he does not seem to be doing an effective job, just like he has not done an effective job as governor. The most liberal, well, we may be tied with him, but the most liberal state in the union, now trying to present himself as a conservative. But that's not the big story. That was just an update from a topic that we've had in this program frequently. But Trump is moving to gut the Department of Education. White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt told reporters yesterday the Department of Education will be much smaller than it is today. This president is finally taking much-needed action to return education to where it belongs and that's to educators closest to the students in the classroom. Last year, the Department of Education had a $268 billion budget, which amounted to about 4% of federal outlays. There are 17 offices in the department. When Trump took office, it had about 4,133 workers. Now the administration claims there are about 2,183 on staff. I'm not going to go through everything that the Department of Education does and does not do. There is a very good piece by Ryan King at the New York Post explaining exactly what it does. But when we come back, because I don't want to run too late, we are going to read your comments when we come back. But also, Linda McMahon published an op-ed at the Fox News.com. I don't know why I said the. At foxnews.com. And it's her vision for eliminating the Department of Education. We're going to talk about that. Then we're going to hear from American Federation of Teachers President Randy Weingarten and a few other things on that. We're going to talk about the attacks on Schumer. We've got a lot to get to this morning. We don't have a lot of time to get there. As I said, Nancy Jones, the wife of the late George Jones, the possum, will be joining us to tell us about the new album, George Jones, The Lost Nashville Session. And then in the 7 o'clock hour, we'll be talking with Phil Palmesano, and I will tell you in just a little bit what the schedule looks like next week as well, so you can prepare for that. Keep the comments coming in. Keep the waves coming in. We're just getting warmed up on this Friday morning edition of Frankly Speaking. Stay with us. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. And we are back, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. Some comments from viewers. It makes sense that there would be a protest today since there's a half day of school, at least at the middle school. Well, good point. I know the past protests had been, one was President's Day, so a day off, and then one a few weeks ago was on a Saturday, and I know the one that I had actually received some information on April 5th, that would be a Saturday as well. But again, take with a grain of salt. I'm not positive about today's protest. It's just what I heard through the grapevine. Next up, Bernie Sanders and Cortez. You know what's interesting? When I first read this, I don't think I've ever heard her just called Cortez. It's always Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, or it's always AOC. So it looked interesting to me at first. That's not any criticism. I don't think I've ever heard that. But so Bernie Sanders and AOC are teaming up and doing rallies to denounce Trump and Musk. I will say one thing. AOC has more charisma than Hochul. Well, you have set a very low bar, viewer. Yes, I would say so. I mean, she knows who she's playing to. Hochul doesn't ever seem to really know who she's playing to, and she also doesn't know, in my opinion, what issues to be tough on. Comment from a different viewer. Gavin Newsom, sheep in wolf's clothing. Thank you very much, and that comes with a wave. Next up, time for Phil, Tom, and Nick to get on the stick and address the NYSEG issue. This is a massive issue which people have no control over and directly affects the quality of our lives. Well, I won't speak for them, but I know we talked with Senator Tom O'Mara, and he is very much so, and I know that Assemblyman Phil Palmesano very much so as well. And I don't know specifically about Congressman Nick Langworthy, any statement-wise, but next time we have him on the program, we will ask him directly. But I do know they are. I know they're fighting this tooth and nail, and I'm sure it'll come up directly in our interview today, and it definitely did with Senator Tom O'Mara last week. So thank you for that. So talking about the Department of Education, Linda McMahon released an op-ed saying, "I took office as Secretary of Education with a mission unlike any of my predecessors, to oversee the response and permanent closure of the very department I now lead. This is not a routine mission. It is a transformation driven by the clear will of the American people to return education to the states and the decisive election of President Donald Trump. This is not my first experience leading a federal agency. In Trump's first term, I was at the helm of the Small Business Administration, an agency established in the 1950s to support entrepreneurial startups and privately owned companies. Both on my watch and years previous, the SBA delivered measurable success for job creators and workers. Small businesses have doubled in number since 1980, creating 2/3 of all new jobs in the past 25 years. That is why the SBA enjoys bipartisan support in Congress and a broad popular mandate. Education is the exact opposite story. Since the Department of Education opened its doors in 1980, it has overseen an era of stagnation and decline in student achievement. Despite more than $1 trillion in federal spending, test scores have flatlined and millions of students remain stuck in failing government-run schools. Rather than providing real solutions, the department has too often prioritized federal micromanagement instead of support for meaningful learning. It has perpetually demanded budget increases beyond what Congress has allocated, all without demonstrating a return on investment in the form of improved student learning outcomes. And that's always been, as a side note, before I go back to her piece, that's always been one way they, specifically those on the left and the teachers union, they always say it takes more money. It's always about more money. We see it with local school budgets as well. It's got to be more money, but there's never been a demonstrable rise in education or in achievements. But I'll continue with what Linda McMahon had to say. Yet for all the federal government spending, few teachers, students, or parents can pinpoint just how the department's work benefits them. Before Trump's directive for federal employees to return to the office, many department staff weren't even showing up to the office, some having moved hundreds of miles from their duty stations. Federal oversight is deeply unpopular across the 50 states. A full fourth of teachers cite workplace rules as a major reason they leave the profession. Trump has responded with a decisive solution in an executive order entitled, quote, "Improving Education Outcomes by Empowering Parents, States, and Communities." He has directed me to dismantle this ineffective bureaucracy and restore control over education to states and parents. Our mandate is twofold. One, to plan in coordination with Congress for eliminating or reallocating the functions and operations of the Department of Education. And two, to ensure that no taxpayer money flows to DEI programs or institutions that embrace DEI. Abolishing the department will not happen tomorrow, but we can move in that direction immediately by revising guidance documents and grant competitions to advance the president's vision of returning education authority to state and local education leaders. If you're just joining us, this is Linda McMahon. As we begin complying with this executive order, we can also dismantle the last administration's DEI agenda and reorient civil rights enforcement so that we are protecting all students from harassment and discrimination, including Jewish students studying on elite campuses and female athletes on the field and in the locker room. Fundamental to this new vision are solid convictions about our work and our leadership role. K-12 education is the responsibility of parents first and foremost, and an investment in their children's future. Yet, for all the federal government spending, few teachers, students, or parents can pinpoint just how the department's work benefits them. Parents should be able to decide what school their children attend, ensure the curriculum is free from political agendas, and choose a school that protects their children's safety and well-being. Students should be able to expect an education that covers the basics with excellence, teaching math, reading, and civics rooted in an honest teaching of American history. When they graduate from high school, they should be prepared to enter college or the workforce education programs that will provide them with well-paying jobs and fulfilling careers. As we execute President Trump's directive, we will systematically unwind unnecessary regulations and prepare to resign the department's other functions to the states or other agencies, including funding programs for states to support low-income students and learners with special needs, the distribution of student financial aid, civil rights enforcement, and data collection. We will end this system that has overpromised and underdelivered, and empower local education leaders to build something much better in its place. No federal agency of this size has ever been eliminated before, but this is a necessary correction, one that will ultimately free our schools from Washington's grip and restore freedom and innovation in education. My responsibility as secretary is to lead this effort transparently by respecting the will of the American people and returning education back to the states. That, Linda McMahon, and I thought was a wonderful op-ed. Now, the teachers union is fighting back. American Federation of Teachers President Randy Weingarten argued that eliminating the federal Department of Education will lead to a situation like the learning loss we saw during the coronavirus pandemic, and said that we saw during COVID. Kids didn't go through kindergarten more than once. They don't go through first grade more than once. If you start cutting what we have in terms of elementary schools right now or high schools right now, how are we going to get it back? And also stated that we have a loneliness crisis. So remember, the teachers union very much instrumental in keeping what was way too long of a shutdown for schools that caused irreparable harm and damage to students. But it was the teachers union that pushed for the longer shutdown than necessary during COVID, if you could even argue if it was all necessary. But that was the teachers union that pushed that, now suggesting cuts and any kind of funding would create another crisis that they originally created. I think they're grasping at straws. The Department of Education, not very popular. As Linda McMahon highlighted in her op-ed, I think this is, yes, the media is screaming that the sky is falling over this. But as the New York Post editorial board, which actually we better get to when we come back, said that axing the education department is fine for kids, but it's rough on the teachers union. It was never meant, the Department of Education, to benefit kids, nor did it. Not one shred of evidence indicates the agency's creation has led to greater student achievement. The fact that the American Federation of Teachers boss, Randy Weingarten, has been all over TV screens blasting Trump's move is complete evidence he's on the right track. The president acknowledged he can't unilaterally abolish the department. That requires congressional action. Nor can he scrap programs Congress has mandated. But it's good to see him starting the process of dismantling this worse than useless bureaucracy. And they go through some examples. But most important, it gets the ball rolling so Congress can help Trump scale back the Fed's role in education and give parents more choice beyond public school monopolies largely controlled by teachers unions. That means more charter schools, vouchers, homeschooling, etc. It means hope for tomorrow's kids. Trump is looking out for taxpayers and, unlike unions and the left, for kids. All right. There's your update on that. We've got to take a short break. Then we are going to hear from Nancy Jones, the wife of the late, great George Jones, here in just a little bit. But we've got one more segment before that, so keep your comments coming in. And we'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox. Stay with us. The beautiful view of Marcus Street from the Frankly Speaking roof cam, brought to you by Boss Security and Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. We had a lot of comments coming in this morning. Let's get right to them. Comment from viewer number one. AOC makes Kamala look like a genius. Fair enough. Talking a little bit about, and I know people brought up the protests that AOC and Bernie, not protests, I don't know what you call them, town halls. We may get a chance to talk about that. I know we're not going to have a chance to talk about much because we have so many guests and so much to cover. Mark writes in, the federal aid to schools doesn't seem to be helping anyway. Just look at the test scores. We are way behind most countries. Why are kids graduating that can't read or write? It's a great point, and that's why I don't think what Trump is doing with the Department of Education is in any way unpopular, other than with teachers unions, right? But if you look at how much is spent, and that's why we've been so critical of school budgets here on the program in the past, because the answer is always more money. But as Linda McMahon so eloquently put it, they underdeliver. They overpromise and underdeliver every single time. So money is not always the answer for our problems. So you make a great point, Mark. Comment from a different viewer. Please thank Phil Palmesano for showing up in solidarity with the corrections officers. I know it was appreciated. Thank you. I will definitely tell him that, and I'll tell him that live on the air because you're exactly right. He was out there, and I want to ask him about the corrections officers when he's on the program this morning. Did you see that Joe Scarborough had kind of a hissy fit on his program? Did you ever notice the scare tactics that the media use? They were criticizing Doge. And first, Joe Scarborough slams his fist on the table. caucus. He's tough. And he said, I just got to say, if you're the Democrat Party and you can't win, please go sell used cars because you're in the wrong business. Okay. Then, in typical fashion, what is Doge going to do? Well, of course, they always suggest they're going to cut Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, go after vets. And here's not a new one, but here's one that he brought up. Quote, they're going to take breakfast and lunch away from poor kids. They will not take tax cuts away from billionaires. So now the children are going to go hungry. The scare tactics, you can tell this is being effective by the way that they protest. Now, speaking of protest, the protests are out for Chuck Schumer. Senator Michael Bennet from Colorado saying yesterday, I do think on the leadership question, it's always better to examine whether folks are in the right place. And we're certainly going to have that conversation. That was in reference to Chuck Schumer. It is really important that we are able to lift up the stakes that we're fighting for the American people to know what we're fighting for on their behalf. And I don't think it was clear in this debate that we were. And in dodging your question, let me say it's important for people to know when it's time to go. This is very reminiscent of how they try to take out Joe Biden from running for re-election. This idea of it's important for people to know when it's time for them to get out. So not completely calling for their ouster, but sending the message to Chuck Schumer that it's time for you to go. But you make the decision. You say it, not us. Now there's a George Soros-backed group that is leading the call for Chuck Schumer to retire. And now the GOP is asking who's actually in charge of this party. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is facing a rebellion over his decision to help pass that continuing resolution. And Republicans have noted that one of Democrat megadonor George Soros' group is helping to lead the charge. Indivisible is pushing for Chuck Schumer's ouster as the minority leader. The Democrats will have an important question to answer in the upcoming days. Who actually leads their party? Schumer or Soros? A Trump White House official told the New York Post. Democrats are eating their own, selling out to the far-left crazies and megadonors who are funding clown show protests across the country. It's painfully obvious that George Soros doesn't believe that leader Hakeem Jeffries or Chuck Schumer have the backbone to lead. And yes, there has been a lot of criticism. We brought that to you yesterday as well of Hakeem Jeffries and the job and his role and what he's been doing. As a matter of fact, there's been huge protests at various town halls saying that the Democrats aren't doing enough to go against Trump. So there's some names being thrown around. But Chuck Schumer just keeps going back to the well, not helping himself. Just saying lawless, angry Trump has put United States in a constitutional crisis. Let me tell Donald Trump and the American people, Democrats in the Senate will not impeach judges, full stop. I can't stand when, especially politicians of a certain age, or any age really, but use the term full stop. So going back to the well, repeating the old lines as his leadership is being questioned, and that goes back really to the early days of the Trump administration when they were protesting Musk, and he kept yelling, "We will win," after they had just lost in that historic landslide election in November. And as I said, now Bernie Sanders and AOC are taking aim at Trump and Musk, as well as Democrats at Western rallies, holding these huge rallies, trying to make themselves, in a way, the leadership of the Democrat Party. Okay, we got to take a short break. Run a little bit late because coming up next, we may talk a little bit more about that. But coming up next, we are going to be talking with Nancy Jones. Nancy Jones, the wife of the late, great George Jones, the possum. Just a quick little interview to talk about the new album, George Jones, The Lost Nashville Session. So stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We're broadcasting from the Hesselson studio, and in that studio via Zoom is Nancy Jones. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Oh, my goodness. Thank you for having me.
Before we start talking about the very special album that's out today, I want to congratulate you on your Emmy for still playing possum music in memory of George Jones. How amazing was that experience to win an Emmy, but also to see that performance?
I tell you what, I was shocked. I never thought that we would win an Emmy on that, but That was such a wonderful show. We had like 35 artists on there.
Yeah.
It was in Huntsville, Alabama, and everyone I called, no one said, nope, I don't want to do it. Everybody agreed to do it. They did it was an honor just to watch them.
And it's amazing when you look at the talent that you put together, but also how long did the actual performance last? Because it just seems like there's so many performers. It must have been a long concert.
Well, no, you know what? It started at 7. It was over at 10.
Wow.
And they were just like, wow, just right on it. We had a good producer.
Wow, that's amazing. So out today is George Jones, The Lost Nashville Session, and it's on vinyl today. You can get it. How does something like this come about, that you find this music that no one watching this program right now has heard before?
Well, what this is that it's the George Jones Lost Session, Nashville Session, is that it was a pitch session. Oh, okay. And what a pitch session is, which you would know, is that people come to your radio stations and they pick a song. Say the Love Bug was out. Okay, well then George goes to that station and he sings it in person, Love Bug. And then sings his heart out because he's really wanting to get that airplay.
Right.
So what happened is that Paul Martin and Rex Allen Jr. came to me and said, hey, we've got these things that radio stations have had, and what they do is once they play them, they throw them in the dumpster.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, okay. He said, but we've got them, and it's 16 of them, and we want to bring them out, but we don't want to change voice, nothing on George's voice.
Right.
Just bring the music and things up to par way it is today. And that's what they did. I mean, it was just, it's amazing. If you close your eyes and listen to this album, you're going to say, my gosh, he's right here beside me. You can feel it because he's singing his little heart out, and it's absolutely wonderful. And someone will say, well, I've heard those songs before. You have heard those songs before, but not the way George is singing them.
No, it's almost, in a kind of a weird way, it's almost like a live album, because they were doing it on one take, right, at these radio stations. Right. So it's almost like...
He couldn't stop it because he was trying to get airplay. If he had stopped it, then it looked like a studio album, you know, where they stopped to start, you stopped it. But no, he sung straight out. I mean, poured his heart out on these songs.
How long was this process? Because as you said, they've been singing around for a while. They needed to be cleaned up a little bit. Not George's part of it, but everybody else. How long from beginning to end was the process?
Well, those were back in the 70s when he did these.
Yeah. So really, since 1970s, right?
Yeah. Yep. So when they called me, Paul Martin and them, it was in 2013. I'm like, I'll never hear from them again. And then, oh my gosh. They called me back and said, it's ready. I'm like, are you kidding?
Yeah.
You really did it? They like, we did.
Wow.
And so that's how it came about.
And I think it's also unique because you've got fan favorites that we all know, but there's kind of what they call future fan favorites that people may not be as familiar with as some of the bigger hits. And I think that's also kind of a unique opportunity for people.
Yeah, just like Luke Combs on the 100th anniversary at the Grand Ole Opry. Yeah. He sings the Grand Tour.
Right.
Well, you know, I was just thrilled to death to hear him sing that song. And it is one of the ones that's on this album.
Right.
And then Garth Brooks sitting up there talking about how the greatest country singer ever.
Yeah.
And then he sings He Stopped Loving Her Today.
Yeah.
I mean, it just made my heart so happy.
Yeah. And when you mention the Grand Tour, I don't think there could be a better song for the Grand Ole Opry, could there? When you really think about the lyrics.
Yep, step right up and come on in.
Exactly. So this is such a unique opportunity and an exciting opportunity for people. You can order it today on vinyl. How does it sound on vinyl?
I'm sorry?
How does it sound on vinyl? It must be really nice to hear it on vinyl.
Oh my gosh, it is just, like I said, it's like you can just close your eyes and reach over there and touch George while he's singing.
That's amazing. Technology is amazing, isn't it? I also wanted to mention, while I have you, your book, Playing Possum, which came out not that long ago, Your Memories of George Jones. How important was it for you to write that book, and did you find it difficult or cathartic in a way?
Well, that book, I died of COVID. I mean, I really died.
Yeah. Oh.
And God brought me back. I mean, you know, and you'll read this in the book, is all the things that I went through, how sick I was. I mean, I lost 70% of my lung, all my hair, couldn't walk anymore. Just all my muscles was being eat up by COVID. And it's, so whenever God brought me back, I think he wanted me to do this book. Yeah. And because I tell the truth, I don't sugarcoat anything.
Right.
And I try to do this in order to get people that's lost and needing the good Lord and Jesus. You're gonna read about this in this book. You'll know why I stayed with George and fought the demons that he had.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, and he had a lot of demons.
Yeah.
And you'll see how I fought them and how I really wanted to get this man to heaven. And in my heart, I know he's there.
Oh, that's so touching. And I know if you read George's autobiography that you should read them back to back, perhaps, because he doesn't seem to sugarcoat anything in that book either.
No, he didn't. No, he did not. Some things I'm like, what'd you say that for?
Did it really need to?
It's the truth.
Did it really need to be that long of a book? You could have cut a couple chapters out, right?
Right.
But you've been so busy. How does this all feel to experience George getting the due that he deserves?
Well, you know, George deserved a lot of dues because he was country music.
Yes.
And he lived, eat, and breathed country music, and you couldn't change him.
No.
I mean, if somebody brought him a song and said, you could do this, just do one rock and roll song. Look what it did to Johnny Cash and whatever.
Sure.
He's like, nope, I'm not going to sing anything but country music. And that's what he did.
Do you think it's because he was pure country that he has such a legacy that people can still tune him in today and know that what they're listening to is pure country?
I think so. I think that if you tune in today and listen to George Jones, even some of these new artists, and they love him. They talk about him all the time. But the fans, if you would just take a listen to some of George's songs and how true and country he was,
right.
It hits a lot of homes. I mean, it hits you right where every day that's going on.
That's why I can't wait to hear this on vinyl, because it'll be an emotional experience, like you said, because if you do listen to current country music, it's not to knock them at all. It's just kind of a different thing. To listen to an album like this of songs that you know, but you've never heard this version before, is going to take you to, I think, a very special place.
I agree.
Now, do you think, and about the legacy of George, that's why when we were talking about Still Playing Possum, why so many younger artists said, I want to be a part of this?
I think a lot of the young artists, when they start listening, they love George, the younger artists do. And when they sing a George Jones song, you can feel them really trying to sing it the way George was singing it. And then they'll say, I can't sing like George. You don't have to, just sing it, because you'll feel it. And just like Luke Combs last night, he did on that Opry, he did such a great job.
No, he really did. So with the new album, which is out on vinyl today, George Jones, The Lost Nashville Sessions, do you see more opportunities like this to come? Is there more songs in a vault, or is this kind of, you better buy it today and this is it?
I would say buy it today, because I don't know of anything in the vault. I think we've emptied it, but if something does come up, I'll be right in the middle of it, putting it out.
Well, that's why I think this is such an interesting story, because these were destroyed. I mean, technically, when these were done, most radio stations, like any radio station, has more records and CDs. So the fact that they were even found goes to show you probably the power of the performances.
True. That everything you said is true.
Now, is there a best place to purchase any of these that we've been talking about? The George Jones Lost Nashville Sessions out today, or your book, Playing Possum?
Oh, you can get it on Amazon.
Okay. Great.
And you can get the vinyl and the CD also there, but you can also get it at Walmart.
Oh, wow. That's great. Well, thank you for giving us so much time today. I know you're promoting this, and I can't wait to hear it on vinyl. I heard a little bit of it digitally and on CD, but there's something that will take us away in that vinyl.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. And y'all go out and get this album, get this CD, and you will be so amazed to see the vinyl. I just love vinyl.
I know, me too. I can't wait. Well, thanks for giving us this time. We'll talk to you soon. How's that?
Okay, thank you.
All right. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking. Stay with us. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. Welcome back as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. A big thank you to Nancy Jones for being on the program this morning. Again, the album George Jones and the Lost Nashville Sessions out today on vinyl. Later on in the program, we'll be talking with Assemblyman Phil Palmesano because it is Fridays with Phil. And we've received quite a few questions for him. Here's the rest of the lineup for next week. How about this? On Monday, we're going to be talking with Deacon Ray from the Rotary here in Corning. They have their international dinner coming up on April the 5th. We're going to hear all about that. On Tuesday, our good friend, Joe Barlow, with the Crystal Chords, of course. She'll be joining us for their upcoming Happy Together a cappella style concert. And that is with Mark Twain Chorus and the Crystal Chords. And that is Saturday, March 29th. We'll find out all about that on Tuesday. And we may just have another special song from Staff Meeting Quartet, which is a part of the Mark Twain Chorus. On Wednesday, Steuben County Sheriff Jim Allard. On Thursday, Corning Mayor Bill Boland. And on Friday, former Congressman, current Assemblyman, Joe Sempolinski. So how about that for a lineup? Looking forward to the next week and today, of course. Comment from a viewer. Florida Congresswoman Anna Paulina predicts that Trump will face impeachment if Republicans lose the House in 2026. This sounds like they are trying to gather up votes to more Democrats in the House, putting hope in people that Trump will be impeached. Yeah, because if you see at these town halls, Democrats are not receiving a warm welcome. Arizona Senators Mark Kelly and Ruben Gallego were told to fight dirtier and get in the mud with Republicans. We want you to show some of the backbone and strategic brilliance that Mitch McConnell would have in the minority, a man told Maryland Representative Glenn Ivey. They should try actually fighting for once. They should try to actually be the opposition party, said another town hall member at the Illinois Representative Sean Casten meeting. Then they go on, and this is a piece from CNN, to criticize Republicans because Republicans have not been holding in-person town hall meetings, and some have, and it backfired because the meetings aren't being held in good faith. They're being held so that non-Trump supporters can go and scream down the Republican representative. And then, of course, CNN and others can splash the headline that in deep red districts, constituents outraged at Trump and Musk. The writing's on the wall. But a lot of a chorus, if you will, of Democrats, constituents, mad at their representatives for not fighting Trump dirty. I don't know if they're looking more for what we've been seeing, unfortunately, in the media, which is the fire bombings of Tesla dealerships. I mean, what do they mean by fighting dirty? It's a scary time with the rhetoric that is being used. And that's why you have AOC and Bernie going out, and we've had people mention this already on the program, going out for these rallies, trying to fire up the crowd. But Douglas Murray had a good piece, which I will get to here in just a little bit, because we got to take another short break already. And then we're going to wrap up hour number one. Assemblyman Phil Palmesano coming up in just a little bit. And we have some comments from viewers we'll get to when we come back. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Oh, well, let me just give you the headline from Douglas Murray. AOC, Walz, these nuts are the future of the Democrats, he asks. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking after this. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are back broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. As Douglas Murray said, this was the week he became convinced that Don Lemon
is an undercover MAGA operative. Now, I would not normally bring up Don Lemon, I don't think, and I know media is a tough business, but I no longer think he is relevant in any way. But the former CNN presenter was on Bill Maher's podcast and was asked about the dire outlook for the Democrat Party. Which way should it go? Lemon ventured, people love AOC. People love Jasmine Crockett. People love Eric Swalwell and the like. I think the Democrat Party should put people out there who the people want, who they are asking for. Now, Bill Maher begged to differ. People do not want these people, but Lemon continued to insist otherwise. Personally, I suspect the only person who ever even pretended to love Eric Swalwell was Chinese spy Fang Fang, who represented Swalwell. Well, we know that whole story, but that's a detail. As I say, the only explanation for Lemon's statement is that Lemon is secretly working to keep the MAGA movement in power for the foreseeable future, because it is only if the Democrats swing to the hard left that they can make sure the Republicans continue in power unchallenged. Despite desperate times may call for desperate thinking, but these are certainly desperate times for the Democrats. Just consider how bad the situation is for the party. First, it has no leadership. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is trying to hold the party together, but his decision on the CR led to a fallout. Former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi even took a jab at Schumer, as we talked about all week. So dire has been the backlash against Schumer that he has canceled his upcoming book tour for security concerns. That's the reason that they gave, or the excuse they gave anyway. But this isn't security. But that isn't security concerns from Republican rivals, no, but rather the disgruntled members of his own party. Second, there is the dire bench that the Democrats are coming up on. One-time Golden Boy Gavin Newsom has spent recent weeks trying to tidy up his image faster than he tried to tidy up the Palisades. Today, Governor Gavin is trying to reach out and show himself to be a man of the political center, which we've talked about as well. Yet the disaster of Newsom's time as governor will continue to swirl around him, and it's unlikely that smoke will be able to clear for a bit of light podcasting. Then there's a left of the party that is trying to drag it their way. But just look at how pathetic it is. It sounds more like a street movement than a political movement. And I'm not going to go through each example of that, of the various quotes that he put together. But if you were the enemy, well then, like Don Lemon, you tell them to go the way of AOC and Cleaver and Tim Walz and Wu, and encourage them to do as much as they can to push it to the far left to keep Republicans in power. I thought it was an interesting idea from Douglas Murray. Okay, quickly, and a New York State issue, and we're going to talk with Assemblyman Phil Palmesano, but I wanted to let you know, if you had not heard by now, New York City, now this is just a city, but New York's, and don't think for a moment if it starts in the city, it wouldn't come here, but New York City's law that allowed non-citizens to vote is dead, as the state's highest court has shut it down in a 6-1 ruling. So, do we have time? Now, Congressman Nick Langworthy said of this decision, as I have fought for years, only American citizens should be allowed to vote in American elections, period. This decision is a huge win for protecting citizens' rights and the U.S. Constitution. I was proud to lead the charge to block New York's non-citizen voting law as state chair, and this ruling affirms what I have fought for all along. So New York City's law allowing non-citizens to vote is dead, as now New York's highest court has shut it down. All right. Wow, a lot of comments. We'll bring this up in just a little bit when we come back. Stay with us. Don't forget, Phil Palmesano coming up in the next hour. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking, hour number 2, mere moments away. Hour number 2 of Frankly Speaking. Broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. I'm your host, Frank Acom. A lot of comments to get to. As I said, Phil Palmesano will be our guest in a little bit. Let's go through some viewer comments. Frank, you must have seen that Jasmine Crockett wants Musk taken out on her birthday on March 29th. Can you imagine the legacy media response of that if that was said about a Democrat by any Republican? Oh, absolutely can. You raise such a good point. There's definitely the double standard in the media. We know it. It's why the media is struggling. It's why they have no credibility. They've lost their credibility. And they just continue to double and triple down not having learned their lesson in most instances. Mark writes, the Democrats have just about ruined this country, and now they are furious that Trump is trying to fix their screw-ups. Totally immature. Thank you, Mark. Comment from Pete. Eliminating the Department of Education is only half the job. States and localities also need to take their resources formally administering counterproductive and make work federal mandates and refocus them on actually educating children. I'd like to hear from local administrators at some point their plan to take advantage of this windfall. Thank you. And a comment from a different viewer. Good morning, Frank. Well, hey, good morning. I wish you would quit condoning the representatives not having in-person meetings. There are a lot of people locally that have questions for Langworthy, and he does not answer them on his calls or in his newsletter. I happen to be a Republican. I still have questions, and I'm disappointed that he is not engaging in an open conversation with his constituents. In my opinion, promoting the idea that all the town halls are being hijacked is not accurate. Well, I guess I just have to depend on the news reports of this, because I believe there's 2 Republicans that held in-person town halls, and both were indeed hijacked. And to your point, and I wouldn't normally disagree with you. I think town halls are necessary. I think now is not a safe or responsible time to have them. But let's take, for instance, Congressman Langworthy. In just recent days and weeks, his one office receiving a white powdered substance in the mail, his other office vandalized. I don't believe, to your point, that it would be an quote-unquote open conversation. I believe that again, I'm just going on what the news is reporting, and the 2 Republicans that held in-person town halls, I watched the coverage, and all the coverage was constituents angry at the representatives, and then they show the videos of them being shouted at, yelled at, booed, hissed. So I think they aren't done in good faith. I don't think it is an open conversation. Open conversation, all for it. I think you're exactly right. I think that's very important. But let's face it, if we just learned that Chuck Schumer isn't holding his book tour to make more money on his book, let alone town halls, I think now I think we'll see more Democrats not holding in person. AOC never really did many in person anyway, even though, and then I only bring her up because she's been in the news so much lately. But because they're being shouted down by their constituents as well, I think you're going to see less and less of them. So I understand your concern, and I understand why you would like to have them. And in a perfect world, it would be nice to have those conversations. I think right now isn't the time. That's my opinion, but I love your opinion as well. That's why I try to read as many of them as I possibly can. Now, keep them coming in, and we'll try to get to as many of your comments as we can, because we do have Assemblyman Phil Palmesano coming in just a moment. Oh, also, I'm excited about this. We have an update on the Corning Moose Lodge, number 274. If you recall, we promoted very heavily the Wienerville celebration held last Saturday, which was a blast. Everybody had a great time, and it was going to benefit the Salvation Army of Corning. Well, we're going to get you that final number of what they raised for the Salvation Army of Corning and the check presentation yesterday. That's before we go on the air with Assemblyman Phil Palmesano. And again, just as we prepare for our guest, coming up, if you are just joining us, on Monday, Deacon Ray will join us from the Rotary to tell us about their upcoming international dinner, which is on April 5th. Then on Tuesday, our good friend Joe Barlow from the Crystal Chords will join us to tell us about their upcoming performance with the Mark Twain Chorus, and we may just get another special song from Staff Meeting Quartet from the Mark Twain Chorus. On Wednesday, Steuben County Sheriff Jim Allard, fan favorite. Sheriff Allard will be joining us on Wednesday, so get your questions in for him. On Thursday, Corning Mayor Bill Bolin will be joining us, and then on Friday, Assemblyman Joe Sempolinski. But coming up next, Assemblyman Phil Palmesano. So stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Marcus Street in Corning. We're going to be joined by Assemblyman Phil Palmesano in just a second, but I got that final tally, and we had a check signing celebration yesterday at the Salvation Army. Our good friends at Moose 274 Look at that check. I don't know if you can read it on your screen, but you can see the goofy picture of me. But they raised $2,950.50 at the Wienerville celebration. I was the 50 cents, Phil. No, they did a great job. Joining us in the studio, Assemblyman Phil Palmesano. Good morning, Phil.
Good morning, Frank. Good to be with you again.
Yeah, I'm glad you could join us. Let's start off with and this is going to lead into my first question. A comment from a viewer. Please thank Phil for showing up in solidarity with the corrections officers. I know it was appreciated. Thank you. And you did attend and got to talk with everyone.
Yeah, I had a chance when all this kind of took off since our last meeting. I went to visit with the corrections officers in Elmira, 5 Points, and Groveland. 5 Points is actually physically my district, but Elmira and Groveland, I certainly have people who work there, and it's right there, so I consider it part of my district. And it was nice to talk to them and to say thank you to them. Mm-hmm. I mean, the viewers saying thank you to me. We should be saying thank you to our corrections officers. I appreciate the comments, but we should be saying thank you to our corrections officers. I said that during the time when I talked to me, how many people were driving by before these protests and strikes, whatever you want to refer to them, took place, and seeing the CEOs on the sidelines there on the streets. Right. Would drive by the Elmira Correctional Facility and see that building up on the wall, on the hill, mm-hmm. and not want to know what's going on in there, not knowing what's going on there. And unless you're an employee, a CEO working there, you didn't know the fact that those CEOs were under constant assault on a daily basis, especially over the past 3 years with the implementation of the HALT Act. Mm-hmm. I mean, the rise in violence has been spiking dramatically. For example, since, after year one, we saw it happening. The other side would say, we need more data, we need more time. After year two, more data and time. But then after 3 years, I think there's been enough data and time since implementation of HALT, which basically restricts the ability to segregate the most dangerous and violent inmates from the rest of the general population, just keep them out of that area. It's terrible that they took that tool away, to keep disciplinary tool to keep them safe. Inmate on staff assaults are up 76% over that period of time. Inmate on inmate assaults, I mean, a lot of people care about the inmates out there, is up 169%. Mm-hmm. And the contraband seizures are up 32% during that time. So it was really good to go out and talk to them and say, thank you, we're with you. Then we saw what happened from there. I mean, it started with a staffing memo before the budget saying 70 is the new 30. I mean, so they weren't going to replace, their thought process was, we're not going to replace existing vacancies or vacancies in posts, not because they weren't important, because they couldn't fill them. Mm-hmm. And that would have solved their staffing crisis on paper, but not change what was going on, the dangerous and going on there. So from that perspective, then, we saw more. We actually had the other thing that was really kind of compelling to me is up in Albany, about a week later from that, up in the beginning of March, we had some spouses and families come up to Albany and to talk to them and hear their stories. I mean, there were some kids there, and to talk to them, and they went up and talked to Media Row. I told them, go up and talk to them in Media Row. Go up and knock and say, listen, I'm a spouse. Don't you want to talk to me? And they did. And I think we needed to hear more from them. And so to see them, and then the following week, the CEOs came up to Albany and had a rally.
It was a big rally.
It was a big
rally. It's very
rally.
frustrating to watch the media's coverage of that, because they showed that huge rally, and then they showed people in support of the HALT Act, and there was maybe a dozen.
Yeah,
I don't know how you could call it a rally.
It's mind blowing. We had a press conference during this time frame too about HALT, about the recruitment and retention and things of that nature, and they were out yelling outside of our doorway. And the fact that, and that's these people that are protesting in support of HALT, it's the inmates are the ones who are really taking the brunt of it. They don't like HALT inside. They want to be able to be segregated. There are a number of people that know that the only way I'm going to get out, not be in general population and be away from everyone, to be safer, be isolated a little bit, is if I go assault a corrections officer. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. So we've seen this progress, but to have the family members come up and talk to them and hear their stories and see, one thing they told me that I was kind of surprised by, they put the names on their uniforms. Mm-hmm. They should be using the numbers because these inmates have so much access to technology. I mean, they especially when they're in a rehabilitation unit, more time than other people. I mean, our CEOs, when they're inside the correctional facilities, they can't be on their phones. They can't bring their cell phones, and they can't talk to their families. So when they're getting mandated for a 12 or 24-hour shift, they can't talk to their families. This is mind-blowing to me. And then this whole way this thing happened, and what the governor failed to recognize, and my colleagues on the Democratic side, it's their policies that has created this staffing and safety crisis inside our correctional facilities. Yep. More prison closures, cramming more dangerous individuals into fewer facilities. putting more dangerous individuals into medium security facilities with reclassification, not providing tools and resources they need to keep people safe. They should have drug dogs at every correctional facility, not just rotate them.
And I'm shocked. I know we talked about it last time, and I read an article about it recently. If you want to go through the metal detector, you can. Yeah. Or X-ray machine, excuse me. But if you don't want to, it's fine.
It's a body scan. It's crazy. I mean, it's mind blowing to me. This just doesn't make any sense. And the mail and package screening, because we continue to see more instances of corrections officers being overcome by substances because they're coming through mail or packages. We need a better deal with that. We need to keep them safe, but they don't. So when the governor had her chance to add some of this stuff for a dress halt, what did she put in her budget? And it was retaliatory. She wanted to, in the 30-day amendments, because her original budget didn't have it, up to 5 prison closures, again, with 90-day notification. Mind-blowing to me. No suspension of the HALT Act, which would have been nice. No death gamble bill, which the death gamble is something she vetoed twice. The legislature unanimously passed it. And she said it needs to be part of the budget. And for the viewer, the death gamble, what it would do is for a corrections officer who's, they've secured their 25-year retirement. They could retire, but they decide they want to stay longer and work, maybe help out their brothers there to stay longer because they know they need the staff. If they were to die after meeting that retirement age, that pension would not be secured for their family. They would just get a death benefit 3 times their annual salary. That's not fair. That's not right. So why not include that? But no, they want to do more prison closures. It doesn't make sense to me. So then after this, she gives there's supposedly there was a deal reached over the weekend. Well, there was of some sort. And they said you had to be to work by 6:45 on Monday. People showed up there, but there were some people and there were some questions about how much communication you were going to get out to the CEOs and members. There were some people that were 10 minutes beyond that. The door was locked on them. They tried to get in, and they were shut out and said, "No, you're fired."
And you had people that were on maybe disability leave or we had an article, I think it was on Empire Report, about a woman who was pregnant.
There's huge problem with that, and they're still trying to sort them out on a case by case basis. But they're being threatened. I mean, I was aware of someone that was out in like the Cleveland Clinic for cancer treatment, and they were saying, "Get back here, or you're fired." I mean, things like that. It was heavy-handed tactics. You do this to these dedicated employees who work a very dangerous job to keep us safe. So let's see. So what does she do? She fires them, terminates their health insurance. Instead of re-engaging with them, I mean, we were calling for like a 48-hour cooling period. Say, hey, let's give these individuals, let's put a stay on this, 48 hours to come back to work. Maybe they missed it. Maybe something happened. But what it would do is be a sign of compassion and understanding on your part and recognition for the dangerous job these individuals do. We never heard back on that, but we asked for that. And how does she top it off? She does an executive order saying these individuals can't work not only in state government, but in local government through an executive order. I mean, it was a huge overstretch, huge abuse of executive authority.
It is. And you had a great statement. I don't have it in front of me. I can't remember the word that you used, but something to the extent of it's vindictive and petty what she's doing at this point.
Totally.
And it all comes in, and Sheriff Adler put it perfectly, that these corrections officers, this is an act of desperation why they did this. They could no longer handle the safety issues. The hours, I think most people were shocked to hear the hours that they work in such a dangerous job. And so what does she do? I wish she would be this tough when it comes to public safety, for heaven's sakes.
Right. So she uses an executive order. A retaliation. That's what it was. And I don't understand. I mean, she could have used her executive order to declare an emergency for a staffing and safety crisis and suspended the HALT Act, but she didn't. So you think she would have learned from Governor Cuomo during COVID how he abused his executive authority. She certainly did. And now you see locals coming up like Chemung County, Oneida County, other counties have made comments about it. We actually have a concurrent resolution to remove it. But there is some talk that she's not going to renew it again because she's took it on the chin, and rightfully so for this. It was just a total stretch and abuse of executive authority, mind blowing to me. I mean, I just think she could have done some positive things. I think if she would open up that window, it would have been a conciliatory, kind of an open. Because there were some people let's make it clear. There were some people who were not going to return to that facility. They were retiring and resigning regardless. But there are some people that really wanted to, that missed it for different reasons. Maybe they didn't get the communication. They should have opened up. And we had a shortage of 2,200 corrections officers before this all started.
Yeah.
Now she's fighting another 2,000.
Yeah.
And what's her plan to use the National
And
Guard?
And the National Guard is not prepared for
They're
that.
not prepared. They're stressed beyond belief. I mean, I went up and I did visit with the National Guard up at Grove, and I talked to them, and they're stressed. They were there for 10 straight days. They couldn't go home. So, and some of these are college kids who are being pulled out of their classes and their education, and being required to be at these correctional facilities. This is not the way it's supposed to be. And so why not go back? And so this is really their plan is to close more prisons. That's what's going to happen. They're going to give her the authority to close, because both houses, and we could talk about the one house later, gave her the authority to close those 5 prisons with 90-day notification, which is an insult. Under the law, she can close any prison she wants with 1-year notification. That's the way you should do it, because you allow these families to plan and prepare, because it's not easy to, in 90 days, to uproot your family, move, look for a new school, look for a new job. But that's what they want to do. And last year, during the budget, during the prison closures, the commissioner said, we have to close the prisons because we have a staffing crisis. I'm like, Commissioner, are you kidding me? We have staffing crisis in our hospitals and nursing homes. We don't see us closing them down. What do? You give better pay and benefits. You do recruitment bonuses. You do retention bonuses.
Treat them with respect.
Treat them with respect. We talked about the death gambles to protect their pensions. That's what we should be doing, and we shouldn't be closing them down. We shouldn't provide that uncertainty to them. But there's a lot more she could have done on this whole process than me. But this executive order, just one thing after another. It's just a total lack of respect, and I just don't understand it.
It's a continued lack of respect for law enforcement in general, coming from Hochul's office.
The way I kind of refer to it is it's like Governor Hochul and the Democrats, progressive socialists in the legislature. Their policies have tipped the scales of justice in favor of the criminal, the dangerous, violent criminal, at the expense of public safety, crime victims, and law enforcement. It's like they're putting the handcuffs on law enforcement and not on the criminals. And it's a very dangerous environment inside those correctional facilities. It's not going to get any safer soon. So let's do some things that can improve the environment for them. They could have, but they didn't.
Was anything in the budget, we'll talk about that in a little bit, focusing on the hours? I know when they had
No, and then that's a good point. And when I went to talk to the officers, it was very, and I know I talked about recruitment and retention bonuses. We need to do that, because the starting salary of a CEO is $56,000. It's abysmal.
Yeah.
But it's not woefully inadequate. I said it to the commission. But when I talked to the CEOs, when you talk to them, they said, this is not about money. This is about safety, and this is about our quality of life. They go, I don't want to be working overtime, going in for 8 hours and say 16 and 24, missing my kid's ball game or missing my kid's play or school event. But that's what was happening. It was their quality of life. They don't, some of these guys are making tremendous amounts of overtime. They go, I don't want to make that much overtime. I just want to see my family. So it's the quality of life, and this policies have created this environment on the violence with the HALT Act, and it was really about the HALT Act, and the governor. I mean, the legislature would have to pass it to get rid of it. That's going to be difficult. But the governor could have used her emergency powers, and could have used an executive authority to suspend the HALT Act. And you would have to renew it, but she could have done it for an indefinite period of time, because if she declares a safety and staffing crisis in our correctional facilities, she can renew the emergency every 30 days and say we have to repeal the HALT Act, or suspend the HALT Act because the violence that's going on. We have to give these tools and resources to our CEOs to segregate the most dangerous and violent inmates. Now, they were talking about stopping programming. That was their answer to the HALT Act, stopping programming. But that's not about programming. Even the CEO said we want them to do programming, but we want to be able to segregate the most dangerous inmate. There's no disciplinary action. If these guys come up and punch and hit, I've talked to CEOs who've been attacked. I mean, even in New York State, a sexual assault against a corrections officer, forcible touching, is a misdemeanor. I mean, it's just what type of these policies show about this governor and the majority in Albany and what they think about our corrections officers is terrible. And then the vindictiveness of this governor on this executive order and what she's saying to them, and she's saying they're never going to work. And she's also threatened their peace officer status and what she did and what they did and how they handled these individuals who were on medical leave, workers' comp, and just putting them through the ringer. We heard stories of people being stuck in the jail who are on leave for 12 hours while they cleared each one of these at time. It took time. It was mind-blowing to me. It's just such disrespect. I mean, just total disregard.
It's important to note, too, that when she takes away their health insurance, they're taking away the health insurance of the whole family.
Yes.
And I mean, that's something
they're hurting kids. And then their reason, not fully reinstating the health insurance. What they did is they said, well, you have to go back and you have to pay the full premium for it. I mean, big hearts. I mean, but you spend $250 billion on all this other ridiculous stuff, but you can't take care of those dedicated employees who work a dangerous job to keep us safe. Really criminal, in my opinion.
I couldn't agree more. We got to take a short break. Just a couple quick comments. Just typical Democrat behavior, turning an adjective like halt into a noun to promote it like it's a good thing. Yes, that's pretty typical. This is a comment, and we actually talked with Tom O'Meara about this. We had Senator O'Meara on not that long ago, and it was about why doesn't the Assembly impeach Governor Hochul, but the fact of the matter is, this just points to why elections are so important, because there's such a majority. That's why we're dealing with the mess that we're dealing with now. Democrats are in control. We don't like it, but they are.
It's true. And
the elections have consequences.
The elections have consequences, I say time and time again.
Yep. We have to take a short break. Stay with us. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. And in that studio, Assemblyman Phil Palmesano. Phil, this morning I received a question from a viewer, and they sent in a map from the CDC, but it says, does Lyme disease education, testing, and treatment come up in conversation for improvement at the state level? I ask because I was 2.5 years before being properly diagnosed, and after testing negative by New York State Lyme test standards. I resorted to a specialist near Albany, and many of the required tests and treatments are not covered by insurance. We know many people infected with multiple tick-borne bacteria facing the same frustrations while being very sick. I appreciate your thoughts and possible support in raising awareness to what happens to be an epidemic in New York State.
Well, I mean, I think the viewer is right. I mean, this is something that definitely needs attention. I see it happen a lot more, during hunting season, with the deer ticks. Obviously, I think there's more awareness that needs to be done on that. And I
hiking,
think
a lot of people get it.
Hiking, and just the things you should be doing, like looking at your pants, scraping yourself, checking yourself. I think the state has done some work on that. Certainly, we can do a better job. And certainly, if the viewer wants to discuss more, if there's things that they have ideas, I'm happy to talk to them offline.
Perfect. All right, we've got to bring this up. It's probably not the biggest issue, but it's a fun issue. Tom Homan, how cool is that?
Oh, my Lord.
I think the coolest thing is when one of your fellow assemblymen was protesting him and yelling and screaming, and they were trying to get in his face. He's just casually eating an apple, walking by. He's a tough hombre, as Trump would say.
Yes, and it was great. And by the way, that Democrat colleague of mine is one of the mayoral candidates for the city.
I know. That's you can see the writing on the wall a mile away on that.
He was like, oh, yeah, but it was great. First, he came in and met with the Senate and Assembly Republican Conference and talked to us, answered some questions for about 45 minutes. He's actually a close personal friend of my colleague, Scott Gray, from the North Country. They went to school together. Scott talked to him, said we'd come in, brought him in. It was great just to have the discussion with him. Yeah. But then we had the press conference, and really we focused on two issues. The green light law, which basically was passed under Governor Cuomo, that would allow illegal immigrants driver's license. Now, they always said at the time it was about making for safety in the streets, but what it did do along with it, it prohibited the DMV from sharing DMV information with ICE. It's not prohibited from the FBI or other law enforcement, but ICE, and now specifically, so they couldn't try to get illegal immigrants out of the country, out of the state, especially if they were doing criminal acts. I mean, It's crazy. That was one of them. The issues. The other bill that we discussed is a bill we have called Lakin's Law. Basically, is named after Laken Riley. Of course. I know there's a federal version of that, and everyone knows who Laken Riley is, a 22-year-old Georgia student who was murdered. And what happened, and I said that in the past, it was a perfect storm of terror. First, this individual crossed our border illegally. Joe Biden, Kamala Harris let that individual go. So where did they go? He came to New York because it's a sanctuary state. Yeah. So they came there, committed a crime in New York. No cooperation with federal officials, ICE officials, but also our bail reform, just released him. Went back to Georgia and murdered Laken Riley.
It's horrible.
It's horrible. It shouldn't happen. So the Laken's Law, what it would do is basically remove the executive order that's still on the books from Governor Cuomo that would basically say we are not a sanctuary state, by saying local and state law enforcement would have to cooperate with federal ICE officials or federal immigration officials, or have the ability to do so instead of being threatened with their jobs and criminal imprisonments and things of that nature. So that's what that would do. But the thing is, that's what the law would do. But we don't need to pass the law. All Governor Hochul needs to do is use her pen, like she did for that executive order to hurt our corrections officer, is to put an executive order and say, remove that order that's on the books, and then we could have that cooperation. It's mind-blowing to me. So he was there. He talked about it. He answered questions probably for like a half an hour. Mm-hmm. And I think my favorite part of it was that he was walking. As he was walking away, someone yelled a question, and he started answering it as he was walking out the door.
Yeah.
Because it was a Senate PR person. No more questions. They still yell. He is answering. He goes, he totally did a flip. He goes, wait a minute, I got to answer this question.
Yeah, you can tell he's passionate.
Oh, he's very passionate. He shared the stories. And I was to the side of him, and I could see him. He was talking about, for the viewers, he was talking about things he had seen. Oh, yeah. Children raped.
Oh, yeah.
People murdered. I mean, and you could see.
That's why he doesn't mess around.
He doesn't mess around, and he's just in the room with him talking. He's pretty soft spoken, but he has a presence about him. But I'm telling the viewers, I could see from the side, his lip was quivering when he was talking about these experiences. He was emotional about that, but he kept his composure the best he could, and he cares. He wants to do the right thing, and it's just common sense. And he says we're going after the criminals first, the violent individuals, and in New York State. Our data shows that they talk about 250,000 plus illegal immigrants, but 58,000 have been convicted or charged with a felony crime. And there's some 1,000 suspected gang members.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Why aren't we going after them? And that's what he wants to do. We want that cooperation. He was getting questions about the Mayor Adams in New York City about cooperation with them. He said he thinks that he really wants to do something about it. Governor Hochul's makes statement that she wants to get people out, but you don't see the cooperation. She should get rid of that executive order. And it's just mind-blowing to me.
Well, it's interesting. It's like the sanctuary state is very similar to the bail reform, where because of, like you talked about with Lake and Riley, there's victims that didn't have to be victims because of these horrible laws.
If we were in a sanctuary state, if our local officials could have collaborated with federal ICE officials, if we didn't have catch and release, that individual would have been put over with federal officials for deportation.
Yep.
And instead, Laken Riley is dead today.
Yep.
It's wrong. It's criminal. It's sad. And there are more stories like that. Laken Riley's got a lot of attention, but there's more and more stories like that across our country. And it's just sad because of the policies, but we also have those types of things happening in New York time and time again. We have the gang. We have MS-13. We have the trail logger. I mean, all that stuff. It's crazy. It's just, we need to be addressing this issue and being cooperative. And the green light law should be repealed. Allow that access to the DMV database for our federal ICE officials. I mean, because people can't, sometimes they can't know who's in the car, or what they can't see the area. That access to that is pretty scary.
We got to take a short break. A couple quick comments. Question for the governor. I don't think they're talking to you. I think they're saying I know we've had people call for you to be governor in the past, but they're talking to Hochul. What schedule do you have for single parents when they can't go home for 24 hours? It seems like an attack on more than the employee. That's a great point for the corrections officers that are forced to work 24, 36 hours, right? I mean, there are going to be single corrections officers out there. Okay. Does the Assembly and Senate realize their failure, along with the governor, is why people and businesses are leaving New York? Do they care?
I bring it up all the time. I mean, even the budget, and I'll share with you a budget story in a minute.
Yeah. Okay, let's take a short break. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox. That's our roof cam, brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. And in that studio, we have Assemblyman Phil Palmesano. Phil, we have very astute viewers out there. You know that. We get great comments. One brought to our attention. We thank them very much. 9 were hospitalized after incidents involving drugs at Attica Correctional Facility. Right to your point. This is just breaking few short hours ago. I mean,
and this is what we've been hearing. Actually, this morning before I came in here, I had a text message from a retired CEO who I was talking about during this time. He said, I don't know if you're hearing, but there's more and more exposures to CEOs with drugs getting into facilities. I mean, goes right to our point. We should have drug dogs at every single correctional facility, not rotated on a regular basis. Because if someone has drugs and they come in the correctional facility, see a dog, the dog's going to catch it, and they're going to turn around and walk away. Yeah. It should be mandatory use of body scanners, not optional use if you don't feel like doing it.
That doesn't even seem possible. Wow,
Yeah,
who would
mind-blowing.
I mean, even if you're not trying to hide something, who wants to go through the extra line?
Right.
Right.
And then also the need for a better mail and package scanning, so the officers aren't being exposed to it. There's got to be a better system, a safer system. We've been calling that for years, and it's just like it keeps getting ignored.
Right.
Invest. I mean, they've closed all these correctional facilities. Invest some of it back into the correctional facilities. Invest it back into the officers. Invest it back into tools and resources to keep them safe. And this is just mind blowing to me. But yes, I'm hearing more about this. There's severances at the beginning of the month as well during this process. It's dangerous.
All right. So what do you think, Phil? We haven't talked about this yet. Well, we did it in general, but about the one house budget.
One house budget. The good thing about it is it's only one house.
Right.
That's good to know. But what it does is what those one house budgets do is they show what the priorities are for the majorities in our house. And what the priorities in our house showed is they want more taxes and they want more spending. I mean, you think the governor who proposed $19 billion more than she's proposed last year was high enough at $252 billion?
Yeah.
And I want to use the number just for the viewer too. $250 billion. My colleague Joe Sempolinski used that. When you hear the word $250 billion, it really kind of puts it in perspective of how much money we're spending. So they came in wanting to spend $4 billion more than the governor, $13 billion more than last year overall. That was adopted when they closed out the budget. And what the other concerning fact about that is there's 3-year out-year gaps. We're talking about nearly $30 billion in projected budget deficits over the next 3 years. I mean, that's unsustainable. And these guys love to spend money. And I said in my comments, they think it's their money.
They do.
They don't take into account. I mean, our families, our small businesses, our viewers, they're making tough decisions and tightening their belts. The state of New York needs to do the same thing. But yes, and just on the tax side of it, Frank, and to the viewer, just a few years ago, they increased taxes on the highest earners up to 10.3% and 10.9% respectively for those who make over $5 million, over $25 million. Now they want to increase it more. I think it's from 10.3 to 10.9% for those making $25 million, and then 10.9 to 12% for those making $100 million. I mean, it sounds like a lot of money. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's a lot of money, but and they keep saying, what's their fair share? What is your fair share? Like the regular, like middle income, those making under $250,000, I think that is around the approximate, are paying about a 6% rate. So these individuals are paying their fair share. And I bring up, aren't you worried about losing more New Yorkers? And they're like, no kidding. The individual I was talking to, the chairman of the Finance Ways and Means Committee, said, they're not. We don't think they're leaving because of the taxes. We think they're leaving because of the weather. Are you kidding me? I mean,
wasn't that Cuomo's line too? Cuomo used to say that.
They're not leaving because of the weather climate. They're leaving because of the tax climate. They're leaving because of the business climate. They're leaving because of the freedom climate. That's why they're leaving. And the people you're going after are the very people who are the most mobile and can leave. Mm-hmm. And I gave a statistic on the floor, and I shared. I just remember it like it was yesterday. In 2000, there were 3.57 million New Yorkers who left the state who had an average income of $140,000. They were replaced by 3.5 million New Yorkers with an average income of $80,000. So it was a net loss of 70,000 New Yorkers, right?
Yeah.
But a net loss of $34 billion in taxable income. Wow. If you look at our adjusted gross income for our state, that continues to decline by billions of dollars a year. But when you compare it to Florida, who continues to increase by the same. So there's that. People are leaving the state. Businesses are leaving the state. They talk about the stock market. There's those who want to tax stock transactions in the state of New York.
They're already going to Texas.
Yeah,
I mean, they're going to be the new Wall Street.
Yeah, I mean, they don't have to be doing it. We learned that during COVID.
Did you see that they call it Y'all Street?
Yeah.
I thought that was clever.
I mean, well, yeah, they're opening a stock exchange in Dallas.
Yeah.
I mean, you see these financial companies that are leaving. They're going to Florida or Miami. They're going to Tennessee. They're going to Texas. Mm-hmm. Why? Because it's a business and tax-friendly environment. So, and I said to them, wouldn't you rather have 10.3% of 25 million?
Yeah.
Or would you rather have 10.9% of zero?
Yeah.
Wouldn't you rather have 10.9% of 100 million? Or would you rather have 12% of zero, because that's what it's going to be, and that's mind blowing to me. So this budget, just on the taxes and spending alone, it's an unsustainable pathway. The other thing the budget had, both houses, I talked about it earlier. I think it's important to bring back up the authorization for 5 prison that doesn't do nothing to help. with certainty for our corrections officers. That doesn't do anything to the governor's going on this big recruitment and retention spree. That's not going to encourage confidence that for people to come into the correctional field or stay in the correctional field because I've known people who they were at Livingston Correctional Facility, that got closed down. Then they went to Gowanda, that got closed down. Then they went to Southport, the Southport got closed down. It's just it's a pathway. Now the governor's going to do it again because they say it's a staffing crisis. Why not address this? I mean, I mentioned the hospital nursing homes, recruitment and retention bonuses. She could have put the death gamble in the budget. Both sides could have put the death gamble in it. We passed it. Why not? They didn't put it in there, which would have protected the pension for those CEOs and things of that nature. I don't understand. And probably another one that just is mind-blowing to me is I've talked about it. Tom talked about it. We did the press conference on CHIPS with our local highway superintendents back, I think it was right after our last visit.
Yeah. And you had the big rally, too.
We had the big rally in Albany as well.
That.
Yeah, I mean, 700 highway superintendents, and we were calling for an increase in the CHIPS program. And listen, Albany seems to focus on the MTA, and I understand the MTA is the lifeblood of the downstate transportation network, but CHIPS is the lifeblood of our upstate transportation network. Sometimes CHIPS is the only money our local communities have to invest in our local roads, bridges, and culverts. I mean, and it's warranted and justified. Fact number one, 87% of the roads in New York State are owned and maintained by our local municipalities. 52% of the 18,000 bridges in New York State are owned and maintained by our local municipalities. Every dollar you invest in the CHIPS program saves $1 from the local property taxpayer. Every dollar you invest in the CHIPS program saves $6 to $14 in long-term rehabilitation costs. Now, the governor in her budget proposed an $800 million increase to the DOT capital plan to deal with the inflationary increases, which is good. But that's for state roads. That's not for local roads. That's not money. It's not, well, can we take some of that? We asked for a $250 million increase for that program because, as the governor proposed, if it went through as she proposed flat, that would be the same amount for 3 years. And now let's go back to the 3-year number again. The Federal Highway Administration has reported that the highway construction cost index, the increased inflation for materials and for roads and bridges and things of that nature, has increased 70% over the past 3 years. So what does that tell you? Any money that our local highway departments are getting is being eaten away by inflation, which is going to put more of a burden on our local highways.
Now, I got to take a short break, but
Sure.
I wanted to read a couple comments first, Phil, and a couple questions. I think there's some good points here. First up, about Laken Riley, could her family sue New York State for not deporting the illegal criminal that enables him to murder Riley? Did anything like that come up when Tom Homan spoke?
No, nothing like that did come up.
Yeah. What will happen to Hochul if President Trump signs an executive order to open up fracking in New York State? I got to get one fracking question.
Sure.
That'd be nice.
Yeah, it would be interesting. She'll probably, Governor Hochul just approved a pipeline, which is nice. It was well needed. President Trump's talking about the constitutional pipeline, which is important because you have to be able to get the gas to the New England areas are being hurt because they can't get the gas up there because of the constitutional pipeline. So it's costing more money. So I'd like to see that'd be great if they did something on fracking, especially in the southern tier.
I know.
There was a talk, before the ban took place that they would do pilots in the southern tier. We don't have to do it in the Finger Lakes. We don't have to do it in the watershed of New York City, but the southern tier across the PA border would have been the ideal place to do it and under strict regulatory guidelines. But it'd be very hard to do that just because it's banned in New York State. But
Right.
Who knows?
Now, Jack actually writes in from Florida. He somehow watches it from Florida, but he said, what you're saying, Phil, is the exact reason why he left New York State. He said, I wish you would run for governor. I would spend more time than just the summer visiting my family in New York. You had to get one of those in. Here's one. Morning, Frank and Assemblyman Phil Palmesano. Well, good morning. What would it take to separate? Oh, this is a question that's come up, I think, as long as you've been on the program, Phil. What would it take to separate downstate from upstate New York in the vote for different governors? It's been talked about forever. Let's act on it. I don't know. I've heard so many different ways of doing it. It never seems to gain any traction, right?
It's very difficult.
Yep. Okay, this person says, I'm one step away to move south, disgusting what is going on in New York. Remember that poll that came out? The number doesn't stick in my head, but such a large number of New Yorkers have that 5-year plan, they call it, to move out of the state, because they can't do it right this second. And I can't tell you how many viewers we've lost on this program. I'll get a text, hey, love the show, but move into, it's sad. And finally, they say, I worked in New York State Corrections as an officer in civilian work. Please help them. Thank you. Well, thank you for the comments. We got to take a short break. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio, and in that studio we have Assemblyman Phil Palmesano. All right, Phil, just one quick comment from a viewer before we go on to some other topics. First, I will share, we had someone reference earlier about Congressman Langworthy not holding in-person town hall meetings. It says, first, I will share that I reached out to Nick Langworthy's office 2 times with 2 different issues, and I received 1 call back and 1 email reply, both within a week of each call. I was very pleased and impressed. And to the other viewer, in reference to Lyme disease, I totally agree and feel her pain. It's very hard to find knowledgeable physicians in the area who knows this illness and who can advise a treatment plan. I was told State College, Pennsylvania possibly, but would be nice to have something solid to count on. I'm not sure if they are probably familiar with LymeDisease.org, but if not, it is a helpful resource for some questions answered. Thank you very much. We're getting a lot of comments.
Yeah, that's great.
All right. I kind of buried the lead, as they say in the media. We didn't talk about EVs yet. We talked about it with Senator O'Mara, but it's time we got this section of our program about electric vehicle mandates, specifically the school buses. When you look at the House budgets and you look at the conversation, what are you hearing? What's going on?
Well, the one House budgets, the only thing they did in the one House budget is they put $200 million in their one House budget for electric school buses, and they put $100 million in for fast charging infrastructure. That's nice, but it doesn't solve the problem here, and here's the thing, and this came up during the budget debate, or during the budget hearings. Let's talk about the 3. We talked about electric school buses a lot, and I would like to talk. One thing you should know about them, and we talked about chips and infrastructure. The weight of an electric school bus is 10 tons per axle. The weight of a near zero emission diesel school bus is 10 tons per axle. An electric school bus is 14 tons on the front axle, 25 tons on the rear axle.
Wow.
The highway superintendents did a study showing that it would decrease through the Cornell Roads program. Cornell is not a conservative think tank at all.
No.
So in the preliminary results coming out saying it would decrease the life use. The normal life use of a road is 10 years. Would decrease that by 20%, so 8 years.
Wow.
Also, a couple other staggering statistics shows that it would increase maintenance costs on a road. This is just the increase per mile from $20,000 to $50,000 increase per mile above what it is, and also total reconstruction costs increase again above and beyond what it is by $550,000. So right there is a justification for chips increases because of the wear and tear. So that's still on the books for the electric school buses. We've been calling for delay implementation. The governor said, it's up to the legislature. It was her bill. She put it in the budget a couple of years ago. I mean, we're doing this everything backwards. And so let me switch to the other issue. So that beginning of January 27, every school bus has to be electric. They have to convert their entire fleet by 2035, a full 5 years before the state of New York has to convert their medium and heavy duty fleets. And the state of New York has an out for feasibility, by the way. It's like we're making our school districts and property tax payers be the guinea pig for the social experiment. So let's pivot to the other EV, trucking industry. They call it the ACT regulation, Advanced Clean Truck Rule, because we're mirrored in California. This requires that manufacturers, but it gets passed on to the dealers, because I've met with both,
Of course.
that you have to sell 1 electric truck for every 6 ICE vehicles, diesel vehicles. There's no marketplace for these.
There's no market. No.
There's none. The cost is exorbitant. But here's the other thing: there's no vehicle infrastructure. I mean, so they put money in the budget. Why not get the infrastructure in place before you put the mandate in place? This mandate took place, is in effect right now in January 25. The DEC delayed the enforcement of it, but not the implementation of it. So you still have to meet these ratios of these sales, and they build up deficits. We had a hearing on this, and the trucking industry said this will devastate the trucking industry in New York. Here's some facts. We have 300,000 New Yorkers that work in the trucking industry. 96% of our products are shipped by truck. And if these trucks can't operate in New York State because they can't register their vehicles here in New York State, they can't buy them out of state because they won't be able to register them, these trucking companies will go out of business in New York State.
Yeah.
So it's not going to take
driving another business out.
Yes, but it's not going to change the need for trucks. So you're going to have trucking companies outside of New York State that are going to be contracted, coming through the state using diesel trucks, going further distances to ship lumber, ship food. What's that going to do with prices? It's going to skyrocket prices of lumber, and we have an affordable housing crisis in the state of New York, don't we? What's that going to do? The food. My colleagues downstate, they want who thinks their food comes from the bodega or the grocery store.
Right.
They don't understand where it comes. That's going to increase prices for food, and we just went through an inflationary impact. I mean, lumber, food, that's going to increase. It'll devastate the trucking industry and jobs. Now let's talk about the advanced clean car rule, another regulation. Now keep in mind, we passed laws which I opposed, said 2035, every new small light duty vehicle has to be new, purchased in 2035, not before that.
Right.
And for heavy duty, every new has to be 2045. Now the state did their own thing for 2040 and their whole fleet by 2040 for heavy duty, and their whole fleet by 2035 for their light duty. Of course, the mandate for the schools. But here's the thing: there's another regulation that says by model year 26 vehicles in New York State under this advanced clean car, 35% of them would have to be electric. I met with the auto dealers. Yeah. I mean, they're scared. I mean, they can't comply with this.
Yeah.
So if they don't comply, and the ratio is much more dramatic for them. It's one electric vehicle for every 2 ICE vehicles they sell. They can't meet that threshold. What does that do for the viewer? If you want an ICE vehicle, there's going to be fewer of them because they're going to sell fewer of them because of the mandates coming from the state to the manufacturers and then to the dealers. They're going to sell fewer of them. So when you have fewer to sell but a demand for an ICE vehicle, what happens? Prices go up. And here's the other thing about it. They said to meet this mandate, we would need 15,000 additional chargers in the state of New York, public charging infrastructure, and we don't have it. We're short that.
And they got to stop burning them down.
Right.
The same party is burning down Tesla.
Yes. I mean, it's mind-blowing.
But it goes back to with our houses all electric, everything all electric. The grid, I know we've said it a million times, like a broken record. The grid is not there.
The grid is not there.
We are not ready.
It's like, even if we make this move to full electrification, the grid's not ready to handle it.
No.
You don't tear down a bridge before you build a new one.
No.
But that's exactly what they're doing with the energy infrastructure in the state. We debated a bill yesterday, and here this shows the ignorance of this.
Yeah.
The other side. Their bill is to create a working group on a fast vehicle charging infrastructure. They don't have to report for 24 months. I'm like, whoa, shouldn't we delay the implementation of these laws? These laws are on the books, these regulations are on the book now.
Yeah.
You don't think that's a problem? You don't think that contradiction? And she was like, no. I'm like, are you kidding me?
So this is a fast committee meeting, 24 months?
Yeah, for fast charging committee infrastructure. So I'm like, well, is there anyone from the truck industry appointed to this group? No. Is there anyone from the auto industry appointed to this group? Is there anyone from the school district appointed to this group?
Yeah.
But yet they have 5 appointments for the governor, 4 appointments for the Senate Majority Leader, and 4 appointments for the Speaker. And I asked, what about a minority appointment? Right. They go, well, we don't. And she literally said, a couple of them said they don't view that as a partisan thing. It's not a Democrat. But I go, the Speaker's a Democrat.
Yeah.
The Majority Leader of the Senate's a Democrat. The governor's a Democrat. The Democrats would control this appointment. Well, that doesn't mean they're going to appoint Democrats. There should be minority appointments. And if we didn't have minority appointments in the Climate Action Council plan, we had that put out that crazy energy plan. Yeah. It would have been much worse than it was. So I don't understand. I mean, we don't have the infrastructure in place to do it. The grid demands are challenging. It's just costly on top of it.
And we are just about out of time, Phil. But I did want to highlight, we've mentioned on the program in the past, but for that scholarship that you announced, the 2025 scholarship opportunity for the Italian American State Legislators Annual Scholarship, the deadline is coming up very soon, the end of the month, right?
Yes, and there's if you don't have it, you can get to us. We can give you got to go online, fill out, submit the application, and then decision. We've had one winner in my time. I think some of the applications that have come in should have had more, but is what it is. But it's a great group that we're a part of. It's $3,000 scholarship, 2 athletic and 2 academic that are provided each year through my colleagues in the Italian American State Legislators Coalition.
All right, Phil, a couple comments before we head out the door here. Good morning. Well, good morning. Arlington, Virginia transit system has clean burning natural gas buses. They're quiet and clean. New York should follow Virginia, not California. We always follow California, isn't it?
Yeah,
sad?
it's terrible.
So sad. Another comment from Jack. New York City needs us more than we need New York City. That's why why won't we separate the states with upstate and downstate? Thank you. And finally, Ken from Horseheads writes in, and this is a perfect way to end the program. We need Phil to head up the New York division of Doge. What do you think about that? Well, thanks for telling us. Do you think the mask ban, I know I asked you about this earlier, do you think the mask ban is going to go through?
I don't know, because the governor proposed it.
She's been so quiet about it.
Yeah, and it just came to the last minute, and we'll see what happens with the negotiations, because the Democrats in the Assembly and Senate don't seem to want it.
No, that's exactly it. Well, Phil, thanks for giving us so much time this morning.
My pleasure.
We'll talk soon after. Do you think you'll get it by April 1st?
No.
Okay, well, there you go. So sometime after, in the month of April,
I think
hopefully?
so. I think
Okay,
so.
we'll talk to you sometime in the month of April. Thanks for joining us, Phil.
My pleasure.
All right, don't forget, folks, next week we got a busy lineup. I want to get those to you before we head out the door here. Well, let me get Phil off the screen. All right, Monday, Deacon Ray from the Rotary. He'll be telling us about the international dinner coming up on April 5th. On Tuesday, Joe Barlow from the Crystal Chord. She'll tell us about their upcoming performance, and we may have a special song from Staff Meeting Quartet from the Mark Twain chorus. On Wednesday, it's Steuben County Sheriff Jim Allard will be joining us. Don't miss that. If you have any questions, you can reach out at the bottom of the screen. On Thursday, Corning Mayor Bill Boland. And then on Friday, former Congressman, current Assemblyman Joe Sempolinski will be our guest. That's on next Friday. All right, have a great weekend, everyone, and we'll be back Monday morning with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, I look forward to it already.